Glad to have everybody here. I'm TJ Raguso. I'm head of international banking for Zions Bancorporation, and many of you that are local know us as a very large regional bank here in the Intermountain West. And what we look in the area of international banking, we support companies that import, export, do projects overseas. We also support a lot of inbound foreign direct investment that comes into our markets. And for those of you outside that are in Utah, we're in 11 western states, and that includes some very large international trade markets. And if you think about our Zions Bank footprint, about 30% of U.S. trade, imports and exports flows through that footprint. So it has been a very important specialty focus for us at the bank. And I'm very pleased today to be moderating the panel. Got Derek Kitchen with us from U.S. Export-Import Bank, and he is he'll let him talk a little bit about his title. And then also Mateo Goldman with Development Finance Corporation. And so you've got their bios, but they have really, the most important thing I think they both share is that they have, in their respective agencies, both have a passion for helping U.S. businesses succeed in the business that they do abroad. And so with that, I will pass to Derek and let him talk about not only his role at XM, but also provide an introduction to his agency, somewhat of perhaps a XM 101, and the same for DFC. So Derek, and also Derek's local, so go ahead, Derek.
Awesome. Thank you so much, TJ, and it's really great to be with everybody today. As was mentioned, my name is Derek Kitchen. I'm with the Export-Import Bank of the United States. And for those of you who don't know, the Export-Import Bank, otherwise known as EXIM, is the nation's one and only export credit agency. And so our primary task is to finance global trade on behalf of American manufacturers and service providers. And we do that in a variety of ways. We provide a whole swath of financial tools to support domestic manufacturing and exports of American-made goods. My role at the agency is, for lack of a better term, I run government affairs, so I'm the political guy at the agency. So I interface with Congress, so the Senate, the House, the White House, our interagency partners like Commerce Department, Treasury, a little bit of State Department, and a few others, SBA, like my friend Mateo here. A few of the tools that we use are, the biggest one is our insurance policy. So if you are providing a good or a service abroad and you have concerns about whether or not you'll get paid or whether or not you'll get paid in time, you can hold an insurance policy with the EXIM Bank, and that will ensure that you get paid. I like to call this the just-in-case plan, right? So you can get paid on your goods and services and have the confidence to ship your goods overseas. The next thing that we provide is our working capital loan guarantee program. And this is a program that we work with institutions like Zions Bank and many others, where we essentially backstop a working capital so that you have the confidence and the ability to make big dollar investments when you have purchase orders from abroad. And then in addition to that, we also do buyer financing. So if Ethiopia Airlines comes to Boeing and says, hey, we want to buy 40 airplanes, you can go to Ethiopia and say, hey, we've got Export-Import Bank in our back pocket, so we have a financing tool ready to go for you. Those are our three main tools. Just quick history with EXIM. We came together in 1934, so 90 years ago. This is a product of FDR's New Deal movement. EXIM was designed to be an institution to help the rest of the world rebuild after the war. And so, like I mentioned, we just celebrated 90 years. We have a big annual conference coming up in Washington, D.C. at the beginning of June. We have FDR's granddaughter joining us. And, I think the agency has a long colored history in terms of supporting American manufacturers. What I will say in terms of our first transaction in 1935, we actually financed the purchase of silver ingots from Cuba. And so we've come a long way in the last 90 years, and the whole economy has changed quite a bit. But really proud to be here today, and I'll toss it over to Mateo here.
Great. Hello. Now I'm very curious because my new friend Derek here has been working with an agency for 100 years. We have been in business, let's call it, since 2018. Who here has heard of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation? We have a few. Okay, just trying to get a sense of. This is I was working in, I'm new to the agency too. I was in private equity and investment banking in New York for about a decade and a half, and I left there to go take this job, and none of my friends in finance had a clue that the U.S. government has a $60 billion development finance institution dedicated to investing in low income and middle income countries. So that's it's interesting, and that's why we're out here too, is talking to you and get you a sense of what the DFC does. But we are the U.S. government's development finance institution, the DFI, and what we do is we are advancing U.S. strategic interests abroad by investing in low and middle income countries in the countries in which we are active. And so that's Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, North Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and various global mandates. We invest, we lend to, provide insurance to local businesses and U.S. businesses, but U.S. businesses that have established local countries. That we have the big way, and I'm thrilled that we have created a panel where Derek and I can sit next to each other and talk where one ends and the other begins. What we are really looking to do is either invest directly or lend directly to local businesses in these countries as a way to advance the U.S. strategic interest abroad. We have a strong preference for local businesses that are owned by U.S. citizens, but those will be businesses that are located in these countries. So we were formed from a merger of OPIC, which was the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which some of you may know, and USAID's program called the Development Credit Authority, which was a lending arm, a private sector lending arm. But we exclusively lend and invest into the private sector. But in 2018, the mandate that we were given under OPIC was expanded. Our lending cap increased from 30 billion to 60 billion. We were given equity authority, and so we are supporting private equity and funds, growth funds, venture capital funds, infrastructure funds through equity, and also investing directly. And we also provide a political risk insurance program, which is different than the one that Derek will talk to you about, and I think we'll get into a little bit about the nuances of our insurance program, but it is also a big program of what we do. Myself, I'm currently the head of the investment funds program, and so we have, the agency right now has about a 40 billion in change portfolio. We have loans and investment and insurance exposure, across the globe, 10 billion in Africa, 10 billion in Latin America. We have India is getting close to that number by itself. Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, very active in all these regions. And so these, but the products themselves we can get into, but the loans themselves are fairly straightforward. These are ideally long tenor loans, anywhere from 10, 15-year maturities, with some competitive interest rates. We have guarantee programs for our financial institutions that are looking to lend, and we'll pick up some of the risk. The insurance we'll talk a little bit about political violence, expropriation for your investments if you were looking to invest abroad. But I think we'll wrap it up and I'll move on. But just a general, but to think about us as we are the private sector lending arm of the U.S. government in these low and middle income countries.
Thanks, Mateo. And Mateo you talked a little bit about some of the markets that where DFC is active, and then Derek, maybe talk a little bit about where the action is right now for EXIM, and perhaps also where some of the opportunities might be for mid-sized companies in the state of Utah.
Yeah. So the Export-Import Bank, we do business all over the world. We offer competitive rates, but we are a bank, so we have to be repaid on all of our products. So we do not give any free money, for example. So we look at every transaction on a case-by-case basis. We do business, like I mentioned, all over the world, but the country that we do business in does have to be a bankable place. And so we do business in Latin America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia. In fact, in our governing documents, our agency's charter, which is passed by Congress, we have a whole mandate dedicated to Sub-Saharan Africa. And so we are really focused on Africa for a variety of reasons. Obviously, there's a lot of potential there in terms of long-term development. There's a national security angle there as well, especially vis-a-vis the People's Republic of China. and competing with the Belt and Road Initiative. But then there's also supply chain opportunities for the United States and our allies in Africa. And so we are very, very focused on ensuring that over the next century, actually, the United States makes the right investments so that we can not only stay competitive, but that we can continue to be, a little bit more aggressive when it comes to these emerging technologies, critical minerals, biotechnology, battery storage, water treatment, things of that nature. And so I would say Africa is one of the regions that we are most focused on these days. We do a lot of business in Central and South America as well. We'd like to do more, of course. And then we've been picking up some new markets over in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, a little bit in Vietnam. It's a little complicated in Vietnam, but we do business in Vietnam. And then, of course, India. There's a ton of potential in India, as you know, most populous nation in the world, and quickly developing country. So we really see India as a long-term partner for us as well.
Well, both your agencies provide some critical services and have important roles in foreign policy and in advancing the strategic interests of the U.S. But unfortunately, Mateo, none of your friends knew what DFC was, and EXIM is also a bit of a niche agency. So what's the best way for companies to access your agencies and learn and somehow benefit from what you offer? Because there's a lot of exports that happen in the U.S. without the benefit of EXIM, and also there's probably many companies that are taking risk internationally, making foreign direct investments in these countries without knowing what they might have available to them. So what's the best way in? Mateo?
I mean that's why we're here, and to make sure, you can call me and I will put you in the right touch. We have the we're doing outreach events like this. I think a part of it is getting the U.S. Businesses and investors familiar with what we're offering. And so I think the best way to think about it, for us, if you are an investor, if you are looking to deploy capital some way into one of these low-income or middle-income countries abroad, Africa, Asia, Sub-Saharan Latin America, this is the best way to do it is just call us. We have an application form on our website. You could submit a form. You could also just reach out. We have dedicated business development people that you can find us on our website as well. But the thing to keep in mind is just to try to get familiar with the ways in which our products work, and probably and importantly for this conference too is please find us the way in which Derek's products and our products work in terms of where the lines start and where the other ones begin.
And if I may jump in on that, just in terms of getting a vibe check, a temperature check on the audience, we have a lot of bankers here, but we also have folks doing international business. So just by a show of hands, if you're a banker, would you raise your hand? Okay. And then if you do business or are looking to do business internationally, can you raise your hand? Okay, perfect. Just I want to know who I'm talking to so I can tailor my message a little bit. So the Export-Import Bank, we have 12 regional offices around the country, and so we have folks on the ground in Utah and in the West here that can help you if you're looking to expand into a new manufacturing facility, or if you want to sit down and talk about opportunities that you may see abroad. We obviously have a website. We have all the normal ways to get in touch with a federal agency. We are showing up at conferences like this and trying to build relationships. But at the end of the day, it comes down to partnerships. And for us, like I mentioned, Congress authorizes our charter. Most recently, we received a 7-year authorization in 2019. And a big part of that is putting our resources to work. So Congress gave us $135 billion to lend out. So far, we have about $34 billion in exposure. So what that means is the Exim Bank has about $100 billion in headroom. So if we've got a checkbook and a checking account with $100 billion, it's in our best interest to activate that to the best of our ability, right? So for us, trying to be as available as possible. We are the government. Nobody wants to hear, hey, we're the federal government. We're here to help, the old Reagan saying, right? But truly, the Exim Bank is here to help. We want to be a good partner to you and your operations and your development overseas. but we also want to be partners with the banks and the institutions that are closest to the ground. You hear a lot about Zions Bank being the bank of Main Street, and that's certainly true. And what that means is that they know what's going on a lot better than the folks in Washington, D.C. And so, we're going to continue to strengthen this relationship. Zions Bank has a really a powerful tool, the delegated authority, that allows them to make decisions and use EXIM tools without having to go before our Senate-confirmed board for decision-making. And so we want to amplify those tools and those resources. But at the end of the day, the economy is changing pretty rapidly. And so for us, it's critical to get out and meet you, understand what you're doing, understand what's going on, so that we can try to make the connection where natural.
Thanks very much, Derek. A little bit of talk about nearshoring today and supply chain resilience. Could you guys talk a little bit about where you've seen opportunities there, for companies that might be trying to take advantage of recent nearshoring developments?
Yeah, I can jump in on nearshoring in terms of what we're trying to do right now. There's a big focus for us is trying to lay the foundation for you when you go into these regions, especially in Latin America, in terms of building up infrastructure. And so that's a big part of the core. That's the heart of what OPIC did in the past, which is financing large-scale, small-scale infrastructure projects. It's the roads and the bridges, but it's also energy generation, transmission, and the like. And so we were looking to back local developers, local energy providers, local infrastructure projects, particularly in Mexico, and we're doing a lot in South America too. We've done in Ecuador, for instance, we did a large-scale solar utility plant. We're backing financing for the airport, the country, large political risk insurance programs there. But the foundation there is not only, we're looking to do this from a variety of different ways. Number one, how is the development finance institution, the corporation, advancing U.S. strategic interests? I mean, number one, we were talking about just showing up and backing high quality projects. Derek talked about Africa. For instance, we are highly active in Africa, but for the reasons that we talked about, which is the PRC, our strategic competitors, are showing up, and what we're trying to do instead of that is back these high quality projects with the highest environmental social standards there are. So that's the way we're doing it there. But just from the advancing strategic interest on the supply chain resilience, we're looking to do a couple of things. One, we talked about infrastructure, South America, Mexico, Latin America. We're looking to do a lot there. But we are also looking on the critical minerals supply chain side as well. And so we did a large nickel mine in the north of Brazil. We're backing a large graphite mine in Mozambique. And this is all towards diversifying supply chain on the energy transition, critical minerals. And that's where we are, at least on the supply chain right now.
Yeah, I mean, as part of this whole of government approach, both Mateo's agency, mine, and many others, we're really trying to stay focused and march in the same direction and complement each other's tools wherever possible. I mean, the COVID pandemic has clearly exposed some liabilities in our global economy, and that expresses itself in a variety of ways, both from business operator standpoint, but also the consumer standpoint. And so we've got a fair amount of work to do ahead of us, especially as the broad economy continues to develop and change and modernize. In terms of the supply chain, the Export-Import Bank is really acutely focused on continuing to develop partnerships with like-minded nations all over the world. Again, there's a national security angle here, but there's also an economic security angle for us. And so we, for example, have in the last 2 years signed 7 memorandum of understandings with various folks in Africa. And so these MOUs allow us to have sort of fast-track processing of various projects, and it loosely commits each of our governments to doing business with each other. For example, Angola is a huge partner for us in Africa. About a year ago, last June, the EXIM Board of Directors approved almost $1 billion transaction with the country of Angola. This is a major solar farm project that will benefit not only the Angolans and the continent of Africa as they continue to move toward green and renewable energies, but this is a good jobs move for the United States as well. We're talking 600 or so jobs in roughly 16 states around the country. So there's a huge component for us here domestically, but there's also a global security issue at play. And so for us, developing those partnerships with like-minded nations is at the forefront of our efforts these days.
Exim, you talk about this big Angola project. You did mention the name Boeing earlier, and these are very large projects that and very large sales that say Boeing selling an aircraft to Ethiopia. But maybe talk about the impact that those projects have or the opportunities they present for small and medium-sized exporters to contribute in the supply chain.
Yeah, proud to. So Boeing, I'll leave all the politics aside these days. It's a great American company. There's a lot of room for improvement, but we're really proud to have been a key supporter of Boeing over the last number of decades. But when you look at a big company like Boeing, not only does it have its own footprint here in the United States, right? South Carolina, Washington State, Illinois, elsewhere, and they are a huge job producer and a great innovator. But if you look downstream, it's the small businesses that benefit. So when Ethiopia buys 40 airplanes from Boeing, it's small companies. I visited a company in just outside of Tacoma, Washington called Pacific Tool, and they make all of the ball bearings and all the little tools that go into the construction of a plane. And this is a small mom and pop shop. It's been around for 35 plus years, but every time a Boeing plane is purchased, it's these small producers that actually are benefiting. And so, one local statistic that I really like, and by the way, just side note, I'm a former state senator here in Utah, and so I love the local government angle. But when you have a local business, you find that $1 invested in a local business recirculates in the local economy a lot quicker than if you go to a national or a global company. So we love global companies, but supporting the small enterprises is really where the strength of a local economy is rooted. And by the way, on that note, 90% of Exim's transactions support small businesses. So yes, we do big businesses with Boeing, and we do a lot of nuclear deals, but 90% support small and medium enterprises. And so I think the opportunity with this $100 billion headroom that I mentioned has enormous downstream opportunities for us.
Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned small business, because as I look back on 30 years of working with Exim, the majority of what we've been able to utilize for Exim Bank has been for small business. And I would say in many of those cases, those companies are often the indirect exporter into a larger project, that they are not the named exporter of record in all cases. They might be selling into a big contractor that's doing a project for Pemex or doing one of these other large international projects. So it's nice to know that your products are available to those that are in the supply chain and those maybe second and third tier suppliers.
Well, we like to say no transaction is too big and no transaction is too small. So if it's $1 billion for a solar project in Angola, great. If it's $1.5 billion for a nuclear power plant in Romania, great. But if we're talking insuring $1,500 for the export of toothpicks or textbooks or pickles to Costa Rica, we want in on that one as well. So we're happy to be here.
Yeah, and luckily I think that DFC doesn't have the same kind of reauthorization drama that Exim has.
That's not true at all.
Well, Exim's always seemed more dramatic. Is yours also going to be dramatic?
You have reauthorization, but ours is certainly the one to watch.
Yeah. So some of you may have read some of these headlines when these certain government agencies have to be reauthorized, but maybe answer what are some of the typical questions about the reauthorization process and perhaps why it matters.
You want to take this one, Mateo?
Well, if you're asking about the reauthorization issues of Exim, I'm going to leave that one to you. we are up for reauthorization next year. We have that will become, so there'll be a number of things that are coming down the pike. It sounds like leading with my chin to talk about the problems we anticipate. Maybe we're going to have a smooth sailing. I will say that the U.S. Development Finance Corporation has broadly received bipartisan support. There are always debates about how do you prioritize, and they're amazingly challenging questions, because we have a very large pool of capital to deploy as EXIM does. We're faced with a number of challenges per year. We partner with local institutions. We're responding to demand, though. And so the capital that we deploy internationally will be driven a large part by what we are looking to, where the demand for that is. And so there will be debates, generally speaking, about what is the best use of U.S. taxpayer money, what is the most strategic way in which the U.S. government can invest, lend, support projects broadly. But generally speaking, our projects have been we are one of the principal ways in which we can directly compete from an investing perspective in these countries with our strategic competitors. I mean, we are the U.S. government's tool to invest equity in local infrastructure fund managers in Africa, for instance. And so from those will generally receive bipartisan support. Some projects they're good debates to have, and I think they've been healthy discussions on the Hill. We expect to have some good, healthy debates next year as reauthorization comes up. But broadly speaking, our base case is that we're going to get reauthorized. We're going to have an increase in investing cap, and we're going to continue to be able to advance our U.S. interests abroad.
Great.
So DFC is up in 2025 for reauthorization. EXIM follows the following year. We are due in 2026. I mentioned earlier that in 2019 we received a historic 7-year reauthorization, which was a real shot in the arm for the agency. So just for historical context, the EXIM Bank suffered a pretty significant blow in 2015 when we had a lapse in our quorum on our board. So we could no longer conduct large-scale transactions, at least temporarily. And then, of course, our charter went through a temporary lapse as well, so we didn't have any real authority from Congress. So between 2015 and 2019, it was a really tumultuous time for the agency, and so we lost a fair amount of really talented staff, and a lot of our business dried up. We are not the only export credit agency in the world. Most developed countries have their own export credit agency, and so companies that were using EXIM in the early aughts, 2010s, that needed us in 2015, moved their business to the French or the Koreans or the Germans, right? And so we lost a lot of business. And so since our 2019 reauthorization, the EXIM Bank has been really focused on rebuilding our business pipeline. And so that's why I'm here today. I hope we can have an opportunity to do business with some of you at some point down the road. But as we look toward our reauthorization, I'm feeling really encouraged because not only did we receive that 7-year reauthorization, but we've also made some huge strides in terms of the kinds of business that we're doing. So I mentioned the big solar project. We do a lot in the renewable space. We've been really focused on critical minerals. This is a big part of the large energy transition. So we want to do more of that. Biotech, a number of other key industries to national security and economic security are a big part of our portfolio. We did $8.7 billion in transactions last year. We're looking to do about $10 billion this year. And I will say that in that 2019 reauthorization, Congress inserted some new authorities for our agency that I think have allowed us to build credibility on both the left and the right, politically speaking. So that tool that I'm referencing is known as our China and Transformational Exports Program. And so CTEP, as it's known, the China program, this is an initiative that is squarely focused on competing with the People's Republic of China, especially as it relates to critical minerals, water sanitation, battery storage, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, all of these really important industries that the United States, quite frankly, we've got to step up our game. And so the EXIM Bank is one of the sharpest tools that the U.S. government has in terms of competing with China on some of these big industries. And so as we look toward our 2026 reauthorization, I'm finding a fair amount of encouragement from our Republican and our Democratic friends. But we do business in renewables. We also do business in oil and gas. And so we've also got a fair amount of criticism from both the left and the right coming our way these days. So we're managing the politics to the best of our ability. But at the end of the day, this is about national security. And so I'm feeling really encouraged about the opportunity to reauthorize EXIM. I will say one statutory liability that we have to deal with right now is EXIM has a 2% default rate cap. And so what that means is if any transaction takes us to above 2% of our total exposure being in default, it's kind of a gun to the head to the agency. It forces us to an automatic shutdown, essentially. And so that 2% default rate cap is a big hindrance for us taking on more risk. We want to do more, but we are constrained by lending practices and the reasonable assurance of repayment that we've got to abide by. Because again, we're dealing with taxpayer dollars, and so we need to make sure that the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. taxpayer is made whole at the end of the day. I'll leave with this final point on the matter. Since 1992, it's worth noting that the Export-Import Bank is the only agency that has returned a profit to the U.S. Treasury. Since '92, we've deposited about $8 billion back into the U.S. Treasury. So we have a lot going for us, but we've got to get out there and make the case. And part of making the case is doing more business. So that's why we're here.
Great. Thanks for talking. Mateo, Chip,
Yeah, I mean, your point, Derek, is great in terms of talking about some of the politics. Just being frank with this group is the politics of renewable energy and the like. But for us, one way to think about it, when you're looking in some of these regions where you're operating, especially, I mean, for us, why Africa? Derek talked about it. I mean, this is a whole of government approach from the strategic angle. But for you who are looking to do business in Africa, we can't overstate our optimism for the region. I mean, I think there's it's for you as you all are thinking about where to deploy globally. There's a demographic shift that is happening in that region that is not happening anywhere else, number one. And number two, there are expectations for GDP growth over the next couple of years that you're also not seeing anywhere else. And so it's really something that I'm glad that Derek raised, and it's a major focus for us. But in terms of when you think about the politics of renewable energy generation, in that region is very interesting specifically on this point, because the renewable energy, the massive cost decrease for generating solar and wind in these regions is so dramatic to where right now, if you are looking to do business in these regions, which we hope you are looking to explore, and will talk to us about how you're doing it in the region, there are serious issues on energy generation security in those countries in terms of stability, and a huge part of that is the grid and these utilities that are really struggling financially. And that is something that you will certainly keep a watch on, especially if you're looking to invest and set up shop locally in these regions, which is what is the stability of the grid. And a huge portion of that is just general infrastructure, but it's also financial strength of the local utilities in sub-Saharan Africa to be actually purchasing this. So when we think about the politics of renewable energy generation, when you start looking at distributed renewable energy projects, which is a big part of what we're doing, and we're doing these billion-dollar, some of them will be utility scale projects like we did in Ecuador, but some of the projects we are doing are the large-scale commercial, industrial energy generation projects that are right now the cheapest in the world is when they're done through solar or wind. And these projects are going to have offtake directly to the large corporates in these local countries. So for us, like, I know you will be looking at this sort of, if you are investing and doing business, the stability of energy supply in these regions. But this is why the politics is, these are non-political issues. There is an incredibly cheap way to develop distributed renewable energy projects for direct offtake to the corporates, to your factories, to your any sort of facilities you're looking to set up in those regions. We are looking to finance it. Exim is looking to support the U.S. businesses going in there too. And so it's just something to think about when I'm really glad we raised the politics of it, because for us, this is about energy generation stability and paving the way for U.S. businesses and economic growth in these regions.
Great, thanks for that context. We've got a lot of export-minded people in the room here. Any questions for Mateo or for Derek? Mm-hmm.
So we would potentially be getting you guys involved to hedge some of the trade risk, right? If we engage your services, is that, and then for whatever reason, let's say your authorization goes bad, is that a front-end risk to us or a back-end risk? Like if we write a contract that you're insuring a particular transaction, is that going to be made good even if we don't reauthorize? Or is it, well, you're good, but only if we reauthorize? Do you see front-end or back-end?
It's a good question. I got two colleagues here that might be able to help answer that a little bit more directly. I see Paul here. I don't know if you want to jump in quickly.
Happy to do so. By law, we have to support that even if we went out of business through the life of your deal. So if it's a short-term deal, we're on you for the short term. If it's a long-term deal, 10 years, 18 years,
And I would say, you know, we at Science Bank, we certainly saw during when the charter lapse happened and the reauthorization challenges, we had a lot of working capital borrowers. And the nice thing is that a lot of those small business products fall below the threshold of board approval, so nothing really affected those. I mean, if you had to do something really big that needed a board approval, well, that might have been constrained. But for the most part, we just rolled along as normal.
So once the project is approved, you're good to go.
You're good to go. And the board approval, by the way, we're talking hundreds of millions of
Yeah.
dollars type. You know, if you're looking at a $50 million project, that's lower level. But once you get into the hundreds of millions, that's when the board has to get involved, and that's where the quorum really becomes an issue.
Yeah. Other questions? Saw some other hands. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we're getting ready to launch what should be a very competitive direct lithium extraction methodology in Peru and Argentina. But our biggest competitor in that area is Sunres, and they're backed directly by the CCP. So it puts us in a pretty difficult position. The good news is typically we're going to have an offtake partner like a GM or a Ford, something of that nature, who's going to be very interested in getting the lithium out of those countries. But I mean, we have no idea how to engage someone like you or how to leverage that. And you know, prior to actually sitting in this chair, I didn't know either of you existed, which might be something you guys should consider from a PR standpoint, because I've been looking for you, right? But definitely curious, how critical is truly competing directly with China in these types of things with something like CETA?
It's the most important thing for us right now. I mean, you're talking lithium, is that what I heard you say? I mean, we're going to talk in the corner after this wraps up, just so you know. But at the end of the day, we wanted to steal that business, quite frankly. If China's looking to underwrite that, they've got 3 ECAs. It's a little bit of a black box in China, so we don't know exactly what's going on underneath the hood there. We don't know how they're moving their money around. We don't know how secure it is. It's China. Ultimately, we want to jump in and we want to be your partner. I will say Argentina's a little bit of a question mark right now in terms of the bankability, but Chile is a partner.
Owned by China.
Yeah.
Peru's open, and Argentina's potentially open, but getting your money out of Argentina.
And part of the CTEP program is we also can be more flexible in our traditional terms. So we should talk.
I mean, just to reiterate, on the DFC was put in business to advance U.S. strategic interest to compete also with the Belt and Road Initiative from China. So we have different products that will overlap in different ways, but that is front and center of what we were trying to do. What I talked a little bit about earlier in terms of Africa, that's one thing, but we are a part owner of a nickel mine in the north of Brazil, looking for to expand.
And I know what your graphite project is coming out.
And so
Syrah's going to the daily. Exactly. On the technical side, we know all about this stuff, but candidly, I don't think you guys are communicating into the renewable energy material space in a way that I've been looking for you.
I mean, I don't disagree. That's why we're here. I mean, that's the. This is for us. We are Washington D.C. based organ. I mean, we don't have the regional offices. We have an international expansion program. We're at 15 people right now and looking to expand to 30. Right now, the agency has 700 people. We're all based in D.C. That's not. It makes it a huge challenge. That's why we'll come out. This is actually a really beautiful place, but we'll go to places less beautiful than Salt Lake City as well to try to get the name out. But I completely hear you.
Great. One last question, and then I know we have a hard stop to get everybody into the lunch past due security. Please.
Well, mine is just really quick. So I'm Linda Larson with 47G Rapping Institute. I want to invite both of you. November 19th, we're having a critical materials symposium here in Utah. And let's get this message out, as Mike was saying.
Thank you.
That's great. And both of you will be around all day?
Around all day,
Yeah.
so let's chat. I'd love to share more information.
Very good. Okay, Derek, Mateo, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here.